I am speaking into a recorder right now because my commanding officer told me to log everything after first contact. So here I am, sitting in a borrowed shuttle, wrapped in a Carthan medical cloth that smells like copper and old rain, talking into a small silver device that probably cost more than my boots. My name is Sergeant Mara Voss. I am 34 years old. I have been in the Earth Remnant Forces for 12 years. And today, I made history. I am going to tell you exactly what happened. No extra words, no drama, just the truth, in the order it occurred. We had been watching the Carthan Coalition for about 6 months before Command decided it was time to make contact. The Coalition was fighting the Veth, the same enemy that nearly destroyed humanity 400 years ago. We knew this enemy. We remembered them. The rest of the galaxy, apparently, had been fighting them without us, and losing ground every single cycle. Command picked me for the job. My supervisor, Colonel Reyes, said it was because I was calm and good with people. I think it was also because I am the kind of person who does not panic when things go wrong, and first contact with an alien species is exactly the kind of thing that tends to go very wrong. I was given a small ship, a translator chip behind my left ear, one sidearm, and an ID transmitter that would tell anyone scanning it exactly who and what I was. Human, from Earth, alive. That last word, alive, was apparently the shocking part. I docked at the Coalition Forward Operating Base at 0600 hours, their time. The base was large and noisy and smelled like 3 different kinds of atmosphere mixed together in a space that was not quite built for any of them. There were Carthan soldiers everywhere. Tall, gray-skinned, with 4 arms and eyes that moved independently of each other. There were Dreyu, who were smaller, quieter, and moved in groups. There were Solon, who had no visible ears but seemed to hear everything. And there were Mech, a species I had only read about in old archives, who stood in the corners and watched everything without moving. The moment I stepped off the ship, everyone stopped. I mean everyone. A Carthan soldier who had been carrying a heavy crate simply put it down. 2 Dreyu technicians turned around from their screens. A Solon commander in the middle of giving orders stopped mid-sentence. The whole base went quiet in about 4 seconds, which, for a military base under active combat pressure, is remarkable. I raised one hand. "Hello," I said through the translator. "I am human. I am not a threat. I would like to speak with whoever is in charge." Nobody moved. Then, from the back of the room, a Carthan, in a different colored uniform, lighter, with markings on the shoulders, walked toward me slowly. The translator chip identified him as a Coalition liaison. His name, according to the signal his own chip was broadcasting, was Drakal 7. He stopped about 2 meters away from me and looked at me the way you might look at something that you have read about in old books and always assumed was made up. His translator device was working hard. I could hear it cycling through language banks. It kept producing one phrase, over and over, in a low voice that was clearly not meant for me. Kinveth. 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 I knew that word. We had found it in old Veth battlefield records recovered decades ago. It meant ghostwalkers. It was what the Veth had called humans, back when they still feared us. Drakal 7 finally spoke. His voice came through my translator as careful and slow, like he was choosing each word with great attention. "You are real," he said. "Very much so," I told him. He was quiet for a moment, then he said, "We were told your kind was gone." "We went quiet," I said. "There is a difference." He did not seem entirely convinced, but he nodded. He asked me to follow him to a meeting room. I followed. The entire base watched us walk across the floor. Nobody made a sound until we were through the door. The meeting room was small and had a table with 7 chairs, none of which were quite right for a human body, but I sat in one anyway. Drakal 7 sat across from me. He placed a data device on the table and looked at me for a long moment before he spoke. "I am required," he said, "by Coalition protocol, to formally present the historical record of your species before any negotiation begins. It is standard procedure when meeting a previously documented race." "Of course," I said. He activated the device. A small projection appeared above the table. It showed images, old drawings, star maps, battle records, and then he began to read. What followed was, without question, the strangest 10 minutes of my life. According to Coalition historical records, humans had appeared in galactic history approximately 430 years ago, during the first Veth expansion. We had fought alongside 3 other species, none of which had survived. We had, according to these records, charged into Veth artillery positions without cover. We had continued fighting after receiving injuries that should have been fatal. We had kept units moving for days without sleep. We had, on one recorded occasion, held a single corridor against a Veth force 17 times our number for 11 hours, with no reinforcement and no retreat. And then we had disappeared. The galaxy had assumed we were finally defeated, that the Veth had finished us in some final engagement that no one had witnessed. We became a story, then a legend, then eventually, a myth told to young soldiers on difficult nights, when the fighting felt impossible, and the Veth felt unstoppable. We had become, in the 400 years of our absence, the galaxy's most comforting ghost story. Drakal 7 finished reading and looked at me. "Is any of this accurate?" he asked. I thought about it honestly. "Most of it," I said. "We left out the part where we also made a lot of mistakes, but the general picture is correct." He stared at me. "You held that corridor for 11 hours. Different humans," I said. "But yes, that sounds like something we would do." He was quiet again. I got the sense he was trying to decide if he was frightened of me or relieved. I gave him time. Outside the meeting room, I could hear the base beginning to move again. Boots on floors, equipment being checked, orders being called out. Normal sounds. But underneath it all, I noticed something had changed. The noise had a different quality, like people talking about something they could not quite believe. We had been in the meeting room for about 40 minutes when the alarm went off. Not a small alarm. A full base alert, lights shifting to red, a deep sound that vibrated through the floor. Drakal 7 was on his feet immediately, his 4 arms moving in quick, practiced gestures as he activated a communication link. I stood too, and through the thin wall I heard what sounded like weapons fire. Not close, but not far. "The eastern perimeter," Drakal 7 said, his voice tighter than it had been. "The Veth have broken through a section of the defensive line." He was already moving toward the door. I followed him out into the main area of the base, and the scene had changed completely. Soldiers were running. Equipment was being moved. The Carthan units near the eastern wall were pulling back in organized groups, not panicking, but withdrawing, making the calculation that the line could not hold and that retreat was the correct response. 2 Dreyu squads simply left. They moved fast and did not look back. The Solon commander I had seen earlier was on a communication line, receiving orders from somewhere. His face, if you could call it that, Solon expressions are in the positioning of their head and shoulders, showed something I recognized. It was the look of someone being told to do something they do not want to do. He was being told to pull back. I stood in the middle of the base floor and watched this for about 45 seconds. Then I stopped being a diplomat. I walked to the nearest Carthan equipment rack and picked up a communication headset. I plugged it into the base frequency, the one all coalition units were sharing, and I spoke clearly in my own translator's output channel. "This is Sergeant Mara Voss, Earth Remnant Forces. I am going forward. Anyone who wants to follow can follow. Anyone who does not is welcome to watch." I put the headset down. I picked up a Carthan pulse rifle from a rack near the door. It was not calibrated for my hands, but the firing mechanism was simple enough. I checked it. I walked to the eastern entrance. Drakal 7 appeared at my shoulder. "You cannot go alone," he said. "I am not asking for company," I told him, "but I am not asking you to stay back either." I went through the door. The eastern perimeter of the base opened onto a wide, flat field of gray dirt, broken up by the remains of defensive structures. The Veth were advancing across it. I counted approximately 40 of them in the front group, with more behind. They moved in the way they always moved, according to every record we had on them. Fast, coordinated, with no hesitation. They did not have faces the way other species did. They had sensor arrays, and right now those sensors were pointed at me. I walked forward. Not ran. Walked. Steady pace. Straight line. Into the open ground between the base and the Veth advance. Behind me, I heard nothing. The base had gone quiet again. I did not look back. I kept my eyes forward and my pace even, and I thought, very clearly, this is the part where we find out if 400 years of stories are going to be useful. The Veth advance slowed. I kept walking. Their front units stopped. The ones behind them pressed forward slightly, then also stopped. I was close enough now to see their sensor arrays rotating, scanning me, trying to fit me into a category. Nothing in their system was giving them a match, based on the way they were moving. I was not in their current threat database. I was not a known enemy. I was something their records had marked as extinct. I raised the pulse rifle and fired. The first shot was not elegant. The rifle was calibrated for a 4-armed operator, and my grip was wrong, and the recoil pushed me sideways. But it hit. The Veth unit in front went down. I corrected my grip, moved my feet, and fired again. They responded. Of course they responded. 2 shots came back at me. One missed. One hit me in the left shoulder. The impact was heavy and sharp, and it knocked me back a step. The armor I was wearing absorbed most of it, but I felt the burn underneath, real and immediate. I took one breath. Then I moved forward again. 45 meters. 40. 35. I was hit a second time. Lower, on my right side, where the armor was thinner. That one hurt more. I stopped for 1 second, assessed that nothing critical had stopped working, and kept walking. Later, Drakal 7 would tell me that this was the moment the entire base stopped breathing. He said the Carthan soldiers watching from the perimeter could not understand what they were seeing. They had training and data and centuries of warfare, and none of it had a category for an enemy that was hit twice and then walked closer. He said the Dreyu, who had already retreated, came back to the perimeter and stood there watching with the rest. He said the mech, who as a species had not shown visible emotional response in any recorded coalition encounter, were making a sound that no one had ever heard from them before. He said the Solon commander dropped his communication device. I was not thinking about any of this. I was thinking about the angle of the next shot, the position of the Veth units spreading to my left, and whether my shoulder would hold the rifle steady. I fired again, and again. I moved in short, careful steps, not giving them a clean line on me, using the broken defensive structures as partial cover when I could, but always moving forward. The Veth advance stopped. This was something that had not happened in 6 years of coalition warfare on this front. The Veth did not stop. They did not retreat. They pressed until they were through, or until a line held so strongly that the tactical calculation changed. But now they were stopping, and their sensor arrays were all pointed at me, and I could see in the way they repositioned that something in their system was flagging me as a problem it did not know how to process. Good. I fired twice more. 1 unit went down. The others began to shift, not forward, sideways, reassessing, looking for a better angle, looking for a way around the thing in front of them that would not stop moving toward them. Then I heard boots behind me. A lot of boots. I did not look back. I kept my eyes on the Veth units to my left, but I heard them. The sound of a Carthan squad moving up at speed, the lighter footsteps of Dreyu, and something heavier that I later learned was the mech, who had apparently made a collective decision in a time frame that no one could quite explain. And underneath all of it, I heard one set of footsteps that did not sound like a soldier at all. Uneven, hesitant, but coming forward. Drakal 7, the diplomat, holding a weapon he had picked up from the rack inside the base. The Veth tactical assessment broke down at this point. The records would later show, we recovered some of their battlefield logs, that their coordination system flagged the situation as an error condition. It could not explain the forward movement of the unknown unit. It could not explain why units that had been withdrawing were now advancing. It began issuing contradictory instructions to Veth field commanders, and in the gap left by that confusion, the coalition line came forward. The Veth fell back. Not all at once, not quickly, but they fell back, regrouped, and chose a different vector. By the time they found one, the defensive perimeter had been reinforced, and the window they had opened was closed. I stopped walking when the field was clear. I stood there for a moment, shoulder burning, side aching, holding a rifle that was not built for my hands. The gray dirt was very still around me. Behind me, the bass was loud again, a different kind of loud now. The kind that comes after something has shifted and everyone is trying to understand what it was. Drakal 7 came up beside me. He was breathing harder than I was, which I found quietly funny. He looked at me for a long moment, then he looked at the field, then back at me. "You were shot," he said. "Twice," I confirmed. "And you kept walking?" "Yes." He was quiet. Then he said, in a voice that was very careful and very honest, "We have a word for that in Old Carthan. It does not translate well. It means something like, the thing that continues." I looked at him. "Sounds about right," I said. He nodded once. Then he said, "I need to contact my command. The alliance offer. I believe the terms have changed. In your favor." We walked back to the base together. Nobody said anything to me as I came through the door, which I appreciated. I do not do well with too much attention after something like this. A Carthan medic pointed at my shoulder and I let them look at it. They called over 2 other medics, and then a 4th one arrived with a scanning device, and they all spent about 10 minutes having a conversation in low, excited voices about my biology. I understood about half of it. The half I understood was flattering. I found a quiet corner of the base near a wall panel that hummed with what sounded like ventilation, and I sat down on the floor. Someone brought me a water container, Carthan water, which tastes like minerals and something sweet I cannot name, and I drank it and did not speak for a while. Then I pulled out this recorder and started talking. So here is what I know right now. I am the first confirmed human contact with the Carthan Coalition in 400 years. I have a preliminary alliance offer from 4 species. I have a medical team that wants to study my shoulder for what they describe as unprecedented healing response, which I think is a generous way of describing the fact that I am still sitting upright. And I have been given, in 3 separate Carthan dialects, a title that my translator renders as the one who did not stop. I have been called worse things. What I know beyond all of this is simpler. We have been hiding for 400 years. I understand why. The Veth were devastating. The losses were enormous. Going dark, going quiet, rebuilding in the fringe. It was the right call at the right time. But 400 years is a long time to be quiet. And the galaxy has been out here fighting without us, carrying stories of us like old lights in the dark, telling young soldiers on hard nights about the species that would not stop. Today, I was that story. I walked out onto a field and I let 400 years of legend do half the work, and then I did the other half myself. And it worked. Not because I am extraordinary. I am not. I am a sergeant from the outer fringe with a faulty shoulder and a borrowed rifle, and a sense of humor that most people find strange. It worked because of what we are, as a species, because somewhere in our nature there is something that looks at a hard thing and walks toward it anyway, not because we do not feel fear, but because we have decided, again and again throughout our entire history, that the fear is not the final answer. We kept going, we always kept going. I am going to send the coordinates back to command tonight, the full data packet, coalition frequencies, Veth movement patterns, the alliance terms, and with it, I am going to send a note to Colonel Reyes. It will say, the galaxy did not forget us. They just thought we were gone. It is time to let them know we are not. I am going to click this recorder off now. My shoulder is stiff. The Carthan medic keeps looking at me from across the room with the expression of someone who has a lot of questions and is trying to decide which one to ask first. The mech in the corner has been watching me since I came back inside, and I do not know enough about their expressions to say what they are thinking, but it does not feel unfriendly. Tomorrow, we begin the real work. Tonight, I rest. The recording ends here. Across the room, on the Coalition archival system, a network that automatically cataloged every significant event and every confirmed contact, a file entry was created. It was logged at the standard timestamp. The entry was brief. It read, First confirmed sighting, Kinvith, alive,